Officials in Iran are clamping down on social media sites and issuing warnings this week as the country prepares to mark 1 year since Mahsa Amini was killed after she was taken into custody by Iran's morality police for not wearing her headscarf properly. Her death started a global protest movement where women in Iran and around the world burn their hijabs and cut their hair. The slogan, woman, life, freedom, has been used as a rallying cry for women's rights in Iran. And for more on what, if anything, has changed for women in Iran since that time, I'm joined by Maral Karimi, PhD of Social Justice in Education at the University of Toronto. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
What has happened in Iran since Mahsa Amini was killed? September 16th is the date that she died in hospital. Since that time, we have seen this global outpouring. What has changed in Iran?
I mean, there hasn't much hasn't changed in terms of structural changes. For example, the regime hasn't toppled following all the protests last year, or the morality police hasn't. Well, it has changed. It morphed into a new force, but it still has the same functions. But in terms of the discourse on the ground and the discourse of surrounding the rights of women, much has changed. We see far more resistance on the ground from young Iranian women who might not have even thought about removing their hijabs. I mean, there were some that were doing it prior to last year, but it's more widespread now, and there is far more support from general public. Of course, there is repression and there is pushback, strong pushback from the government and from some average citizens, but the discourse around rights of women and how this large marginalized group has lost much of their rights post 79 revolution has changed. And also another big change, in my opinion, is the way the relationship with the opposition and diaspora that has drastically changed. Because
in what way?
In that, over the past year, the diaspora, the opposition, the leaders and the figures in the leaders might be a stretch, but the figures in the diaspora have displayed and manifested how ineffective and how unrepresentative of the public are, and they're basically, some of them are basically dinosaurs. They left prior to the revolution or around that time, and they're not really in touch with the democratic aspirations of these young people, and they're not reflective of their hopes and aspirations.
You mentioned that women on the ground, especially young women in Iran, are more vocal about their opposition to some of the repression. We also saw this massive global movement. How has the pressure of both of those two changes and that attention on Iran changed, if anything? Have laws changed at all? The morality police, you said, has a different form, but is their function the same?
The laws haven't changed. I mean, the regime, we have to understand, the regime cannot and will not take a step back on this. This is, women's bodies in Iran have been the ideological battlegrounds for this regime and the previous ones. So it's a part of the regime ideology. They will not budge. However, under public pressure and also international pressure, what they have done, I mean, at the beginning of the protests last year, the government declared that the morality police was disbanded. However, that has morphed into a new, more dangerous force with unmarked vans, people who claim that they're not hired by the government and they're just concerned citizens. But the process is still the same. These vans just, stop by surprisingly out of the blue in large and busy public spaces. They gather everyone and anyone that they think is dressed, quote unquote, immodestly, and they the whole prosecution, imprisonment, fines, and the same process happens. I have reports, firsthand reports of similar beatings and torture happening the same way as it used to be before. So not much has changed in that regards.
Morale, not much has changed, but the fight continues and is growing in strength. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.